How did your twin destroy your life? My twin sister Ren and I were identical down to the mole on our left ear. I divorced my husband Callum 2 years ago after he cheated twice, and I got full custody of our son. Ren swore up and down she hated Callum for what he did to me. Turns out she meant obsessed, not hated. Callum and I met in college. He was funny in that quiet way, the kind of funny you only notice if you're actually paying attention to him, and I paid attention. We got married at 26. We had our son Theo 3 years later. For a while, I actually believed I had the life I was supposed to have. The house, the dog, the husband who texted "drive safe" every single morning like it was a ritual. Then I found the first text. Not even a bad one, just a name saved wrong. A "hey you" from someone who clearly wasn't a coworker. I told myself I was being paranoid. 6 months later, I found the second one, and that one left nothing to interpretation. Photos, timestamps, a hotel receipt he forgot to delete. I filed for divorce 11 days after that. Ren was the one who packed my kitchen boxes with me at midnight. Both of us crying and laughing at the same time because that's what twins do when one of us is falling apart. We fall apart in stereo. She kept saying the same thing over and over like a chant. He doesn't deserve either version of you. I remember thinking at the time that it was the sweetest thing anyone had ever said to me. I got full custody of Theo. Callum got weekends. I thought that was the end of the story. I thought the worst chapter of my life was already behind me, and all that was left was healing. Slowly, the boring, unglamorous way healing actually happens. One Tuesday at a time. I didn't know Ren had a different plan for how this story was going to end. I should tell you too that Ren copying me wasn't new. It was old and so normal to both of us that I never once thought to be suspicious of it. When we were 7, she wore my exact costume to a Halloween party a day early just to see if our own grandmother could tell us apart. And when Grandma guessed wrong, Ren laughed so hard she cried. In high school, she took my driving test for me because she'd already passed hers and thought it would be funny, and it was funny back then because nothing was actually at stake. We built our whole relationship on the premise that being interchangeable was a game we were both playing together, on equal terms, for equal stakes. I never once considered that one of us might eventually decide the stakes weren't equal at all, that one of us might start playing the game alone. It started small enough that I didn't think anything of it. She'd mentioned running into Callum at the grocery store near his new apartment, which was weird because that store wasn't near anything she normally did. She'd say things like, "I just want to keep an eye on him for you. Make sure he's not saying anything ugly about you to Theo." I thought she was being protective. I thought I was lucky to have a sister who cared that much. I actually told my therapist that Ren checking in on Callum made me feel less alone in the custody fight, like I had backup. God, I was so stupid. What I didn't know, what I would not find out for 4 more months, was that checking in meant showing up at his apartment at 9 at night. It meant sitting on his couch in my exact haircut, my exact voice, wearing a coat she'd taken from my closet without asking because she said hers was at the dry cleaner. It meant being the version of me that missed him, the version of me that wanted to talk things through instead of the version of me that had every legal right to be furious. Ren became the wife Callum wished he'd had the whole time. Soft where I'd gone hard, forgiving where I'd drawn a line and meant it. She let him cry about how much he regretted everything, and she told him she understood. And somewhere in the middle of all that understanding, she ended up in his bed, as me for 4 months. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I had to sit with it for a lot longer than a second when I finally understood the shape of what had happened. 4 months of my son's father sleeping with my identical twin sister and genuinely believing, at least some of that time, that he was sleeping with me. 4 months of her borrowing pieces of my life like props. My perfume, my laugh, which is really just her laugh too, if we're being honest, since we've had the same laugh since we were toddlers. My son's father's hands on her like they were on me. I had no idea, not a hint, not a flicker. I was too busy actually living my life, taking Theo to soccer practice, picking up extra shifts, trying to remember how to be a person who wasn't defined by her divorce anymore. Then one Tuesday in March, I got served papers. I remember the exact moment because I was standing in my kitchen with wet hands from doing dishes, and I signed for an envelope thinking it was something boring. A change of address confirmation, maybe a jury duty notice. It was an emergency motion for custody. Callum's lawyer was requesting an immediate hearing, citing a pattern of what the filing called erratic and dangerous behavior on my part. It said I had shown up at his apartment on 3 separate occasions, intoxicated, screaming at his door, once at 2 in the morning, once banging on his window until a neighbor called the police non-emergency line to ask him to check on the noise. I read it standing in my kitchen and I actually laughed because it was so obviously wrong. I hadn't been to his apartment once since the divorce. I don't even know the exact address. I had never once shown up anywhere intoxicated in front of my son's father, not in 11 years of knowing him. I thought it would be easy to disprove. I had my phone records, I had my location history, I had text messages proving I was home on every single one of those dates. Tucking Theo into bed, watching reruns of shows I don't even like because I was too tired to change the channel. I did not have the one thing that actually mattered in that courtroom. Did not have an explanation for the video. Callum's lawyer had doorbell footage. Grainy, dark, time-stamped, but unmistakably a woman with my exact face stumbling up the front steps of his building at 2 in the morning, swaying, screaming something the audio couldn't quite pick up, banging on the door hard enough that a neighbor's porch light came on across the courtyard. My own lawyer looked at that footage and then looked at me with an expression I will never forget for the rest of my life. It was the look of someone who believed the video over the person sitting right in front of of them, because the video didn't lie, and faces don't lie. And my face was right there on the screen doing something I swore on everything I loved that I had never done. Is there anyone who could have access to your appearance? My lawyer asked carefully, like she already suspected the shape of the answer and didn't want to say it out loud first. I said the only thing I could say. I have a twin sister. My lawyer paused for a long moment before she asked her next question, and I could see her doing the math in her head, weighing whether a jury of one, a single family court judge with a packed docket, and about 11 minutes allotted per case that afternoon, would find that explanation believable or find it desperate. Does your sister have any reason to want to hurt you? She asked, and I said no, of course not. We're close, we've always been close. She helped me pack boxes the week I left my marriage. I said it with total confidence. I meant every word of it. That's what makes this whole thing so hard to explain to people who ask me how I didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming because there was nothing to see. Ren was good. She was so good at being me that she fooled a man who had shared a bed with me for 11 years. The judge did not care. The judge cared about a pattern of alleged behavior and a child's safety and a video that looked, to any reasonable person unfamiliar with the specific horror of having an identical twin, exactly like me. The judge granted emergency temporary custody to Callum pending a full investigation. I lost my son on a Thursday afternoon in a courtroom that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. And I remember walking out into the parking lot afterward and not being able to find my car for almost 10 minutes because I couldn't see straight through the tears. And when I finally found it, I sat in the driver's seat and I did not drive anywhere for almost an hour. I just sat there with my hands on the wheel, shaking, making a sound I had never made before, something between screaming and choking, because the person who had done this to me was supposed to be the one person on earth who would never do this to me. 6 weeks. I had my son for 6 weeks out of every year of his life before that. Weekends and holidays swapped fairly, birthdays split evenly, and now I had 0 weeks, 0 days, 0 hours, while the court investigated a crime I did not commit, using a body I did not control, in a place I had never been. Theo called me every night that he was allowed to, which wasn't every night because Callum controlled the phone now, and Callum was furious, understandably furious at a version of events he believed with his entire chest. On the nights Theo did call, he asked me the same question in different shapes every single time. Why can't I come home yet? Did I do something wrong? Is this because I told Dad I missed you last weekend? I told him none of this was his fault so many times that the words stopped sounding like words in my mouth. I told him I loved him more than anything on this planet, which was true, and I told him this would get fixed, which I did not actually know was true. Not for certain. Not on the nights I lay in his empty bedroom on his empty bed because I couldn't stand to sleep. In my own room alone, there's a specific kind of silence that fills a house when a child who used to be in it is suddenly gone from it. Not for a weekend, not for a sleepover, but indefinitely, with no fixed date circled on any calendar telling you when it ends. I would stand in the kitchen at 6:30, the exact time I used to start making dinner, and my hands would just hover there over the counter like they'd forgotten what job they were supposed to be doing. I bought his favorite cereal out of habit during a grocery run in week 3 and stood in the aisle holding the box for a full minute before I understood why I was crying over cereal. I want to tell you I was strong through all of it. I wasn't. I stopped eating regularly. I stopped answering calls from friends who wanted to check on me because I couldn't stand explaining it one more time. I sat in Theo's room some nights holding a stuffed dinosaur he'd had since he was 2, and I did not cry. I just sat there hollow, staring at glow in the dark stars on his ceiling that we'd stuck up there together on a Saturday afternoon that felt like it belonged to a different woman's life. The break, when it finally came sideways, the way these things usually do. Callum's next-door neighbor, a retired man named Griggs who fed the stray cats behind the building and noticed everything because he had nothing else to do with his evenings, mentioned to Callum in passing that he'd seen me leaving one night in a car he didn't recognize. Not my car. A different make, different color, with a parking permit sticker from an apartment complex clear across town. Callum, to his credit, actually looked into it instead of dismissing it. He ran the plate through a friend who worked in insurance. It came back registered to Ren. He told me later that he sat in his car outside his own apartment for 20 minutes after getting that information, running through every conversation he'd had with me for 4 months, replaying tiny details that had never quite added up, a birthmark that seemed slightly off, a way of saying a certain word that felt not quite like mine, a story about our childhood that he now realized I had never actually told him, because it wasn't my story to tell. It was hers. My lawyer subpoenaed the parking records, the doorbell footage from Ren's own building, phone tower pings that placed my actual phone at my actual apartment on every single one of the nights in question, while a phone registered to Ren pinged from Callum's neighborhood instead. We confronted her together, my lawyer and I, in a conference room with too much fluorescent light and a box of tissues nobody had touched yet. Ren did not cry. She did not even look particularly sorry. She looked, if anything, a little bit amused, like she was finally being asked the one question she'd been waiting for someone to ask. She laughed, an actual laugh, short and sharp, before she said it. I just wanted to see if I could take your whole life and get away with it. I asked her why. I needed there to be a reason big enough to explain what she'd done. An old wound, a jealousy I'd never noticed. Something that would make even a small amount of sense out of 6 months of my life being systematically dismantled by the one person who shared my face. She didn't really have one. She talked vaguely about always being the other one, the twin people mixed up, the twin who didn't get the promotion or the marriage or the kid. And somewhere in that vague resentment, she'd decided the fastest way to feel like she had a life worth living was to simply take mine for a while and wear it like a coat. She almost got away with it. That's the part that still keeps me up some nights. If Griggs hadn't fed those stray cats every evening, if he hadn't happened to glance up at exactly the wrong moment on exactly the right night, if Callum had been a little more furious and a little less curious, I would have lost my son permanently to a lie built entirely out of my own face. The custody case got reopened once the evidence came in. It didn't take long after that. The judge, who had looked at me with something close to suspicion 4 months earlier, looked at me the second time with something close to an apology, though judges don't really apologize, not in words. I got Theo back on a Friday afternoon, and when he saw me in the pickup line at Callum's building, he ran so fast he nearly fell. And I caught him, and I did not let go for a very long time, and neither did he. Ren was charged with impersonation and fraud. She got a restraining order filed against her from both me and Callum, and a criminal record that will follow her for the rest of her life. My parents, who had spent months quietly siding with her because they too had believed the video, stopped speaking to her almost entirely once the truth came out. I don't know if that estrangement is permanent. I don't think about it much. I don't have room to think about it. Not with everything else I'm still putting back together. Callum and I are not back together, and we never will be. But something changed between us that I didn't expect. There's a strange kind of intimacy in being lied to by the same person in the same way. He looks at me now the way you look at someone you survived something with, not the way you look at an ex-wife you're still angry at. He told me once, standing in my doorway on a Tuesday handoff, that the worst part wasn't finding out Ren wasn't me. The worst part was realizing that for 4 months, he'd been falling back in love with a version of me that had never actually existed. Gentler, softer, endlessly forgiving, and that the real me, the one standing in front of him with every right to hate him, had never once been given the chance to be that unfair to him. I told him that was the whole point. That version of me was never going to exist for him again, twin or no twin, because I'd earned the right to stop being endlessly forgiving a long time ago. Theo is doing okay. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for, and also more fragile than we want to admit, both at the same time, somehow. For the first couple weeks after he came home, he slept with his bedroom door open and a small lamp on, something he hadn't needed since he was 5, and I never once mentioned it or made him feel babyish about it. I just left the hallway light on too, every single night without being asked. He still asks sometimes why Aunt Ren doesn't come to birthdays anymore. I tell him the truth in small pieces, the pieces a 9-year-old can actually hold without it breaking something in him. Someday when he's older, I'll tell him the rest. Some nights, after he's asleep, I still walk past his room just to look at him breathing, the way I used to when he was a newborn, and I didn't trust the world enough to let him sleep out of my sight. I don't think that instinct ever fully goes away once you've had it taken from you and then given back. People ask me sometimes if I still love my sister, underneath everything. It's a complicated question with an answer I'm still not totally sure of. I loved a version of her for 30 years that I don't think ever fully existed, the same way Callum loved a version of me that never existed either. Maybe that's the real twist in all of this. We were all in love with people who weren't quite real, wearing faces that weren't quite telling the truth. I look identical to the woman who did this to me. I will look identical to her for the rest of my life. Every time I catch my own reflection in a dark window at night for half a second, before my brain catches up, I see her instead of me. That's the part nobody warns you about when they talk about having a twin. It's not the matching outfits or the secret language or the party trick of swapping seats at dinner. It's this. It's knowing that somewhere out there, walking around with your exact face, is a person capable of using it against you, and that every single day for the rest of your life, you'll have to live inside a body that looks like the weapon she used.